What are God's institutions for today? You must know this to know how to apply 75% of the Bible for today. Hello everybody, I'm Jim McCotter. Welcome. What institutions is God ordained? How many? I've asked hundreds of Christians this question and most Christians don't know. Woefully, even many Christian leaders don't know. God has ordained 3 and only 3 institutions that are all active in the world today. Having discovered that most Christians don't know what they are is clearly one of the reasons Christians are not making a greater impact in the world today than they could. God's 3 institutions actually make up the context of all scriptures. Everything God is working in the world today is exclusively for his 3 institutions. You will recognize them when I identify them, but one of them has been greatly ignored by evangelicals ever since the 19th century. The first institution God ordained was marriage, family. Genesis 1:26 through 28, quote, "So God created human beings in his own image. In the beginning, God created male and female. He created them. Then God blessed them and said, 'Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it.'" God's first institution was mandated to fill the earth and govern it. God ordained his third institution through Jesus, his church. Matthew 16:18. Jesus said, "I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overpower it." End quote. The gates of hell are the prison gates of Satan holding people. Jesus mandated his church to invade through the gates of hell to free people with the power of his gospel. Romans 1:16, quote, "The gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes," end quote. God's least understood institute for Christians today was God's second institution, the nation-state, civil government. God ordained the nation-state institution right after the flood with Noah and his sons. God started his second institution with his first civil law for man to carry out his justice in society. Civil law is what identifies a nation-state institution. Genesis 9:5 through 7, quote, "And I will require the blood of anyone who takes another person's life. If a wild animal kills a person, it must die. And anyone who murders a fellow human must die. If anyone takes a human life, that person's life will also be taken by human hands. For God made human beings in his own image. Now be fruitful and multiply and repopulate the earth." End quote. The mandate here was for God's people to carry out capital punishment on all murderers. Through Moses on Mount Sinai, God later wrote out all the rest of his civil law for Israel and all other nations. Today, we have all God's law in the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible, starting at Genesis 9:5 through Deuteronomy 34:12. The order that God ordained his institutions was first family, second state, third church. Family and state were both instituted in the Old Testament, but reaffirmed many times in the New Testament. God established all 3 of his institutions for himself to be holy and exclusively for his glory. The problem is, many Christians today don't realize that God demands his nation-state institution to be no less holy and for his glory than either of his other 2 institutions. All 3 of them have different purposes, but none were ordained by God to not be holy and honor him. God did not create or institute anything ever to not glorify him. God must have thought his nation-state institution was critically important for Christians today, for them to know about, for he would not have left over 75% of the book, Exodus to Acts, exclusively written about Israel and other nations if when following his law. Some spiritual leaders today are illegitimate who do not follow God's word for his church. No less so are civil leaders illegitimate today who do not see themselves as God's servant and do not follow God's word for his nation state. Christians are right to think Christ should be head over the church. But why do they not see, as Apostle Paul wrote in Colossians 2:10, quote, Christ, who is head over every ruler and authority. End quote. Why do they think the state belongs to who? To Satan? Jesus identified Satan in John 10:10, quote, "The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy," end quote. The state belongs to Christ to rule through his people. But whenever God's people abdicate any of God's institutions, the thief will always come and steal it, and then kill and destroy it. Just because many non-Christians have usurped positions of civil leadership, that does not mean the state belongs to them any more than the church should belong to non-Christian elders or pastors. What would good Christians do if some non-Christians gained leadership over their church? All the good Christians would immediately rise up and vote all the non-Christians out of having any authority. They could still come to your church, but not rule it. God instructs the exact same application for his nation-state institution. Non-Christians can live in a Christian nation and be blessed unlike living in any other nation, but not rule it. Did you know in God's Mosaic law, his first law was that all judges could only be chosen from God's own people, Deuteronomy 1:13. Also in the New Testament, the Apostle Paul made the same thing clear, that Christians should establish their own judges. 1 Corinthians 6:1. God let many strangers, non-Christians, live in Israel, but were never to rule it. To let non-Christians rule, which the New Testament says are in the kingdom of darkness, Colossians 1:13, and Jesus and the Apostle John said their, quote, father is the devil, John 8:44 and 1 John 3:8 through 10, is to let the devil rule. Did you know in all American colonies, only Christians in good standing could run for civil office? They also had to pledge to uphold the gospel and the Bible, etc. They obeyed Romans 13 and only let, quote, servants of God serve as civil servants. And did you know for a period of time the same was true for most state laws after the U.S. Constitution was signed? This was one of the big reasons why Patrick Henry, Samuel Adams, and many other patriots were initially against signing the U.S. Constitution because it did not require only Christians being civil authorities. God said in Isaiah 42:8, quote, I am the Lord, that is my name, and I will not give my glory to anyone else. I will not share my praise. End quote. We take a lot that we talk about and say it as common sense these days. How can any Christian have common sense today in thinking we can be, quote, one nation under God, end quote, if we let people rule who are under the devil in the kingdom of darkness? Satan understands the importance of this principle in places where he has stolen nations. For example, look at all the Muslim nations. Christians or anyone can live there, but not rule it or break their law. Amazing that we must use Satan's stolen nations as examples in principle for what God intended for his ordained nation states for his glory. For well over the first 1800 years since Christ, most Christian leaders understood that God ordained the nation state exclusively for his people to rule for his exclusive honor and glory. It was not until the 19th century this theology began to be largely ignored, and today most Christian leaders are not even biblically aware of it. But America was founded on this biblical understanding. Jeremiah 10:7 says this, quote, Who would not fear you, O King of nations? That title belongs to you alone. Among all the wise people of the earth and in all the kingdoms of the world, there is no one like you.